I want to continue our discussion that we started at the beginning of yesterday's show about the responses that we've seen to the terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel, and now the war that is taking place between Israel and Hamas. And one of the things we talked about yesterday that I want to continue, because I didn't get to all of these different wild talking points that have been getting spread, is Republicans who have decided the priority should be hurting Biden politically. That should be what they do in terms of a response to this horrific set of atrocities. And they should exploit a crisis to see how much they can hurt their political opponent. And it's shameful. And there should be moments where we're able to set aside partisanship across the board when things are taking place, such as what we're seeing right now. And in the past, I would say ironically or in a contradictory fashion, Republicans would say that it was so important for example, under Bush, after 9/11, during a crisis, for Americans to unite around the president. Set aside your political differences and unite. Don't criticize a bunch his response to these attacks, and instead show the strength of the United States by unifying. But now, of course, that's not at all the priority in a crisis moment. It's the opposite. And so we'll go through some more examples of this. Then I'll get to another set of responses from non-Republicans that have been horrifying as well. So here's this from Tim Scott, the Republican senator and presidential candidate. Biden's weakness invited the attack. Biden's negotiations funded the attack. And this is him writing on X. Biden administration wanted Israel to stand down after the attack. At this point, Biden is complicit. And of course, that's false. Yesterday, if you're curious, we went through the segment, has Ted Cruz in the thumbnail. If you want to watch it on the YouTube channel, specifically debunking this idea that Biden funded the attack, or how do you even address Biden's weakness? It's the same thing they'll say with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Can you point to specific rhetoric you're talking about that you take issue with? Or can you point to policies that he's acted incorrectly in implementing or not implementing? What are you actually talking about? Just a vague statement like that means absolutely nothing if it's not connected to actual facts. And that's what, of course, Tim Scott doesn't have with this statement. And again, desperately trying to figure out how do we exploit this moment to hurt President Biden, when in reality, weakness, this, that, and the other thing, he has, and we'll get to a clip of this in a moment, come out very strong in support of Israel in this moment, and is very clear, projecting strength and clarity on where the United States stands. And then you have this talking point. Ralph Norman, the Republican congressman, said, "A lid before noon while the Middle East is on fire. This is par for the course with Joe Biden." And Ron Filipkowski pointed this out for us. What he's referring to is yesterday, what they call a lid was announced, which means reporters don't have to expect another public event for the rest of the day. And so Biden had done a public event. He's not going to do any more. A lid. And it made total sense. I'll give you an example of what he was up to instead of doing more public events, which was the correct thing on the part of Joe Biden. But it got portrayed by Republican congresspeople and others, and then definitely people on Fox News, as Biden is, taking a nap or just hanging out. And the fact that a lid was announced means that the White House shutting down or something, which that's just not what it means whatsoever. It is saying, all right, we're not going to have any more public events. We're going to be working behind the scenes. And again, I'll get to an example of what that work looked like. But here's John Kirby responding to this talking point on Fox News.
No question about it.
All right. So the president, the White House called a lid on the president at 11:46 a.m. this morning. Given what is going on, John, why would that be?
Well, a lid means that he doesn't have any more public-facing events. It doesn't mean that the president's not working, and he absolutely is working. He had another update this morning with his national security team. He stayed updated throughout the day. He's going to be talking to foreign leaders later this afternoon. There'll be a public component to that in terms of at least making it clear what that conversation was like and what the details of it were. We'll be putting that out and making sure people know what that conversation was all about.
Is the president at the White House right now, John?
He is indeed, yes.
All right, so why?
It's just manufacturing these controversies. Why is that even at all something you're trying to make a story? When obviously it's because he was needing to be busy doing things and not just delivering speeches. Such as Ron Filipkowski on X also pointed out, while Republicans were and are screaming on Twitter that Biden called a lid on public events at noon, it was because he was busy hammering out a multinational aid agreement with our allies, among other things, while Republicans were doing important things like posting clickbait. Exactly. They were, quote unquote, hard at work at figuring out how they could craft a post on X to perfectly dunk on Biden. He was hard at work, which is why he announced that or called a lid and was doing this, a joint statement on Israel outlining what had been established, the agreement that had been made. They were coordinating foreign leaders and Joe Biden on what the response would be to these terrorist attacks. Exactly what you would want the president of the United States to be figuring out right after a crisis such as this. And then we'll get to Joe Biden himself delivering remarks on this subject.
Bloodthirstiness brings to mind the worst rampages of ISIS. This is terrorism. But sadly, for the Jewish people, it's not new. This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. Its stated purpose is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. They use Palestinian civilians as human shields. Hamas offers nothing but terror and bloodshed with no regard to who pays the price.
And that last part gets us to the second set of responses that I want to address and save them for the second half of the segment, because I'm going to leave the segment distraught as every time I think about these, have such a hard time even comprehending that this is the stance of people. So we've seen, I guess, people who would say they're on the left, some fringe group of individuals who would, again, identify that way, even though I completely reject the idea that they align with any progressive values, who are apologizing for, even in some cases, as we're seeing some protests to this effect, celebrating the bloodshed, the carnage, the terrorism brought on by Hamas. And it's disgusting. I see that they're trying to proclaim it to be advocacy for, even though it's absolutely not serving this end. But they say it's advocacy for Palestinian people. If you care about the humanity of people across the board, Israeli people, Palestinian people, then you would wholeheartedly oppose the egregious acts of Hamas because of the horrific violence that they inflicted upon Israelis. And then if you're proclaiming yourself to care about, as we all should, again, humanity across the board. And for Palestinian civilians who are not a part of this, but are going to be impacted by the response, you would also be disgusted by the acts of Hamas, because they knew what the reaction would be. They expected Israel to respond and decided to go after women and children and babies. So if you actually care, as we all should, about human beings, Israelis, Palestinians, then Hamas is absolutely something you must be fully and completely opposed to and be able to unequivocally condemn. And we should all be united in our disgust when it comes to the acts, the egregious killings, the massacre that we witnessed. And for people, again, to posture as advocates for the well-being of Palestinian civilians when Hamas's actions is only harming them, as Biden pointed out, is so dishonest and vile. Just to reiterate this, I did write on X, it's utterly disturbing to see so many people shrug off or even celebrate the terrorism of Hamas. Civilians murdered and kidnapped, infants beheaded, absolutely horrific and inexcusable. As the president suggests, one can and should support Palestine's right to dignity and self-determination while unequivocally opposing the atrocities of Hamas. And I really do wish this could be a moment where, as a country, we unite. But obviously that's not happening. Truly disturbing stuff. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show and the bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. And there's a link in the description.